It would be very difficult to cast both of those characters.
For almost 6 decades, Clint Eastwood kept a priceless secret in his garage. A rare Shelby Cobra, now worth $4.5 million. He bought it in 1965 for just $7,500, straight from Carroll Shelby himself. Years later, during restoration, they discovered Shelby's cigarette burns on the seats and hidden handwritten notes under the hood. Rich collectors still try to buy it, but Eastwood always refuses. And the real reason he won't let it go has nothing to do with money. And it might surprise you. A giant beginning. Clint Eastwood was born on May 31, 1930 in San Francisco, California. And from his very first breath, he was impossible to ignore. Weighing an astonishing 11 pounds 6 ounces, he was the largest baby ever delivered at St. Francis Hospital at the time. Nurses stood in disbelief, amazed by his size, and some jokingly began calling him Samson, after the biblical strong man. The moment was so unusual that it was reported in a local newspaper. Long before Clint Eastwood understood fame, he had already brushed against it, unknowingly stepping into the public eye on the day he was born. His parents, Clinton Eastwood Sr. and Ruth Runner, were middle-class Californians struggling to survive during the Great Depression. Life was not easy. Clint's father worked first as a steel worker and later as a salesman, taking whatever work he could find. His mother stepped into factory jobs whenever the family needed extra income. Despite the pressure of the times, they managed to provide a stable household. In 1934, Clint gained a younger sister, Jean, and with her arrival came added responsibility. The Eastwood family moved frequently, chasing better opportunities and steadier work. Those constant moves shaped Clint's personality early, forcing him to become independent, observant, and adaptable. By 1940, the family settled in Piedmont, California, a wealthy and exclusive neighborhood near Oakland. At the time, minorities were barred from buying property there, a restriction that would not be overturned until the Supreme Court banned racial housing covenants in 1948. For the Eastwoods, Piedmont represented security and comfort. They owned multiple cars and enjoyed luxuries such as swimming pools and country club access. During an era when many families were still counting pennies, these comforts stood out sharply. Academically, Clint struggled. He never finished high school, and while some reports suggest he briefly considered college or studying music, his grades made that dream unrealistic. Rather than forcing a path that did not fit him, he entered the workforce. He took on physically demanding jobs, work that was exhausting and unglamorous. Those years hardened him, shaping his discipline and quiet resilience, traits that would later define his screen presence. In 1951, his life shifted dramatically when he was drafted into the United States Army during the Korean War. He was stationed at Fort Ord, California, where he worked as a lifeguard. While there, rumors followed him. Don Loomis, a fellow serviceman, later recalled hearing that Eastwood was dating the daughter of a high-ranking officer. If true, that connection may have quietly helped when assignments were discussed, though nothing was ever officially confirmed. The military gave him structure, but it also handed him a brush with death. In 1951, while returning from Seattle after a classified meeting, Eastwood was a passenger on a Douglas A-D bomber that ran out of fuel mid-air. The plane crashed into the ocean near Point Reyes. With only a life raft, Clint and the pilot swam nearly 2 miles to shore. The experience did not leave him shaken. Instead, it reinforced his calm relationship with danger. He was discharged in February 1953 and soon found himself at a crossroads. His entry into Hollywood has been told in competing versions. A CBS press release for Rawhide later claimed that a Universal International film crew noticed Eastwood while working at Fort Ord and invited him to meet a director. However, his unauthorized biographer, Patrick McGilligan, questioned that story. Another account, supported by Eastwood's official biography, credits a man named Chuck Hill, a serviceman with Hollywood connections. Years later, Hill reconnected with Eastwood in Los Angeles and reportedly used those connections to sneak him into Universal Studios, where Clint met cameraman Irving Glassberg. That meeting changed everything. Glassberg arranged an audition with director Arthur Lubin. At 6 feet 4 inches, Eastwood looked the part, but his acting skills were raw. Lubin later admitted Eastwood was completely untrained, unsure of where to stand or how to deliver lines. Still, something about him lingered. Lubin encouraged him to take acting lessons and helped him secure a studio contract in April 1954, paying $100 a week. Success did not arrive overnight. Eastwood was criticized for being stiff and speaking through clenched teeth, a trait that would later become iconic. In May 1954, he auditioned for 6 Bridges to Cross, but was rejected by director Joseph Pevney. Rejection followed rejection, yet he refused to quit. Director Jack Arnold eventually cast him in a small role in Revenge of the Creature in 1955. Later that same year, he appeared briefly as a jet pilot in Tarantula. The role passed almost unnoticed, but it was a beginning. Quiet, unremarkable, and easy to miss. And yet, it marked the first step of a journey that would eventually reshape Hollywood itself. From failure to frontier legend. In 1958, Clint Eastwood finally landed what looked like a real opportunity. He starred in Ambush at Cimarron Pass, a western meant to push him forward. Instead, it nearly ended everything. The film followed a group of soldiers trapped in hostile territory, struggling to survive an ambush. On paper, it sounded promising. On screen, it fell apart. The plot was thin, the dialogue stiff, and critics wasted no time tearing it apart. Years later, Eastwood would bluntly call it the lousiest western ever made. He sat through the screening, shrinking lower in his seat as each scene played out. By the time the credits rolled, the disappointment was crushing. Turning to his wife, he said he was finished with acting. He truly meant it. He began thinking seriously about quitting, maybe going back to school, maybe finding a different career altogether. For the first time, the dream felt foolish. But instead of walking away, he did the opposite. He pushed forward. That single choice changed the course of his life. Not long after, CBS cast him as Rowdy Yates in Rawhide, a television western centered on a cattle drive team crossing dangerous territory. Filming began in Arizona during the summer of 1958, and by early 1959, the show was on the air. Within 3 weeks, Rawhide cracked the top 20 in television ratings. For the first time, Eastwood had steady work and national exposure. His salary jumped to $750 per episode, a massive leap from where he had been. The job, however, was grueling. He worked 6 days a week, often filming 12 hours a day. The schedule was punishing, but the visibility was priceless. Yet fame did not bring satisfaction. Eastwood hated how his character was written. Rowdy Yates was impulsive, immature, and often foolish. Eastwood later referred to him as the idiot of the plains. He wanted depth, seriousness, and control, but television kept him boxed in. By 1965, Rawhide was losing steam. Ratings fell, and CBS canceled the show. For many actors, that would have been a devastating blow. For Eastwood, it felt like a release. He wanted out of television, but Hollywood was not offering him the roles he believed he deserved, so he gambled. That same year, an Italian director named Sergio Leone was searching for a lead actor for a low-budget western called A Fistful of Dollars. Big stars like Henry Fonda and Charles Bronson had already passed. Leone needed someone with quiet intensity, someone who could command the screen without constant dialogue. Eastwood read the script and immediately sensed something different. This was not a clean, heroic western. This world was brutal, cynical, and raw. He accepted the role. The film was shot in Spain on a budget of just $200,000. It was loosely based on Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo, replacing a wandering samurai with a nameless gunslinger. Eastwood's character barely spoke. He wore a poncho, chewed a cigarillo, and let violence speak for him. When the film premiered in Italy in 1964, expectations were low. Then it exploded. grossing $14.5 million worldwide. The success reshaped westerns and launched the spaghetti western genre. A sequel, For a Few Dollars More, followed in 1965, pairing Eastwood with Lee Van Cleef. By the time The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly arrived in 1966, Eastwood was a global movie star. The final three-way duel, set to Ennio Morricone's unforgettable score, became cinematic history. The partnership with Leone was not easy. Filming dragged on. Language barriers caused tension, and Eastwood disliked Leone's long, theatrical directions. Still, together they changed cinema forever. That change brought conflict with John Wayne. Wayne believed westerns were about honor and moral clarity. Eastwood's films rejected that idea. When Wayne saw High Plains Drifter in 1973, he was furious. He wrote Eastwood a letter criticizing its violence and cynicism. Wayne refused to work with him again. Wayne represented the Old West. Eastwood represented what came next: power, controversy, and the life off screen. Another film that sharply divided audiences was American Sniper. In 2014, directed by Clint Eastwood, the film told the story of Chris Kyle, a Navy SEAL sniper credited with 160 confirmed kills. It arrived at a time when the Iraq War was still deeply debated, and the reaction was immediate and intense. Some viewers praised the film for its raw portrayal of a soldier's psychological burden and battlefield tension. Others argued it simplified the war and avoided confronting its political and moral complexities. Regardless of the criticism, the impact was undeniable. American Sniper became a massive box office success, earned 6 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, and remains one of the highest-grossing war films ever made. Age never slowed Eastwood down. In 2018, he starred in The Mule, playing an elderly man who unknowingly becomes a drug courier for a cartel. The film blended quiet humor with themes of regret, aging, and missed family connections. Even more remarkable, at age 91, Eastwood directed and starred in Cry Macho in 2021. The project had been circulating in Hollywood since the 1970s, with names like Arnold Schwarzenegger once attached. Eastwood was the one who finally brought it to the screen. The story followed a former rodeo star tasked with escorting a young boy across the US-Mexico border. Reviews were mixed, but the fact that Eastwood was still working entirely on his own terms stood as a statement in itself. Away from the camera, Eastwood's personal life was often as complicated as his films. Over the years, he fathered at least 8 children with 6 different women, though some remained unknown to the public for decades. His biographer, Patrick McGilligan, even suggested the true number might be higher. One child was reportedly conceived while Eastwood was still in high school, adding to the long list of unanswered questions surrounding his private life. His marriage to Maggie Johnson in 1953 was troubled almost from the beginning. During the marriage, Eastwood had numerous affairs, including one that resulted in the birth of Lori Murray. She was placed for adoption, and her existence remained unknown until 2018, when she appeared at a family event at age 64. While still married, Eastwood also maintained a 14-year relationship with stuntwoman Roxanne Tunis. Their daughter Kimber was born in 1964, but the public did not learn about her until 1989, when the National Enquirer exposed the story. In 1975, Eastwood began a relationship with actress Sandra Locke. While living with her, he secretly fathered 2 children with flight attendant Jaslyn Reeves. Their son Scott was born in 1986, followed by their daughter Catherine in 1988. Both birth certificates listed "father declined," and Eastwood did not publicly acknowledge them for years. Even now, he has never confirmed the exact number of his children. His relationship with Locke became one of the most turbulent chapters of his life. In 1989, while Locke was away filming, Eastwood changed the locks on their home and moved her belongings into storage. She later filed a $70 million palimony lawsuit, accusing him of emotional abuse. The case settled for $450,000 and a Warner Brothers production deal secretly financed by Eastwood. When she discovered the truth, she sued again in 1996. Locke later described the relationship as a horror story, marked by control and manipulation. Cars, however, were one constant source of comfort. Eastwood's love for automobiles began as a teenager, fueled by auto mechanic classes and long solo road trips across California. In 1951, he bought a 1949 Chevrolet panel truck for $25, roughly $260 today. It became his home during his early Hollywood struggles. Decades later, it was restored for $65,000 and remains in his collection. Over time, that collection grew into a reflection of his life, diverse, practical, and deeply personal. From a Ferrari 275 GTB to a 1977 Pontiac Trans Am Special Edition, Eastwood's cars tell the same story his films do: resilience, independence, and a refusal to follow anyone else's rule. The machines that defined him. Eastwood's passion for cars never stayed locked inside his garage. It followed him onto the screen and became part of the language of his films. For him, vehicles were never just background props. They carried meaning, history, and personality. The clearest example of this philosophy appeared in Gran Torino, where a 1972 Ford Gran Torino Sport played a central role. Powered by a 351 cubic inch Cobra Jet V8, the car was more than transportation. It symbolized Walt Kowalski's past, his pride, and his loyalty to a disappearing version of America. The Gran Torino represented craftsmanship, discipline, and self-reliance, the same traits that defined the character himself. Eastwood connected with that symbolism so deeply that when filming Wrapped, he bought the car outright. It wasn't just a souvenir. It was a statement. That connection between machine and meaning ran through other films as well. Cars from Eastwood's personal collection appeared on screen more than once. The Pontiac Trans Am, for example, showed up in Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, reinforcing the idea that cars in his movies were extensions of the people driving them. For Eastwood, metal, horsepower, and motion were part of the storytelling. A car could communicate values before a single line of dialogue was spoken. One of the most legendary purchases of his life came long before his directing career reached its peak. In 1965, while still starring in Rawhide, Eastwood bought a Shelby Cobra 427 SC directly from Carroll Shelby himself. The price was $7,500, an enormous sum at the time, but almost laughable compared to what the car would later be worth. The story behind the deal became part of Hollywood lore. When Eastwood took the Cobra out for a test drive, Shelby watched closely. He was so impressed by Eastwood's control and confidence behind the wheel that he knocked $1,000 off the price. There was only one condition. Eastwood had to promise to drive it like he stole it. He did exactly that, logging more than 50 track days at Willow Springs Raceway. This was no ordinary Cobra. Only 29 semi-competition models were ever built. The SC designation meant it was designed for racing first and only later adapted for street use. Under the hood sat a 427 cubic inch Ford 5.8, producing 485 horsepower. In the mid-1960s, that level of power bordered on absurd. The Cobra could sprint from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 4.3 seconds and reach a top speed close to 165 miles per hour. Lightweight, aggressive, and barely street legal, it demanded respect from anyone brave enough to drive it. What truly sets Eastwood's Cobra apart are the details left behind by Carroll Shelby himself. When the car was restored in the 1990s, mechanics discovered cigarette burns on the passenger seat, marks Shelby left while watching test runs. Under the hood, handwritten notes from Shelby outlined cam timing adjustments used during early testing. Hidden beneath the seat was a small compartment containing Shelby's personal stopwatch and timing sheets from track sessions. These weren't rumors or embellishments. They were physical traces of history, turning the car into a rolling archive of American performance engineering. Over the years, Eastwood has received offers exceeding $5 million for the Cobra. he has turned them all down. To him, the car is priceless. It represents a time when performance mattered more than regulations, when cars were built for speed instead of safety disclaimers. It embodies Carroll Shelby's raw genius and Eastwood's AutoZone connection to a freer, risk-driven era. The Cobra isn't just a collector's item. It is a symbol of identity, independence, and a lifelong devotion to machines that demanded everything from the people who drove them. For Clint Eastwood, cars were never about status. They were about freedom, craftsmanship, and the thrill of motion. Just like his films, they told stories of power, restraint, and a world that refused to slow down. Clint Eastwood's life has never been about slowing down. From survival and struggle to legacy and steel, every chapter shows a man who lived on his own terms. If you enjoyed this deep dive into his journey, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Watch the next video on your screen to continue the story.